For some of you, you have a life and interests and hobbies that include spirituality. And so that entails things like feeling energy and crystals and healing and working on the chakras and these types of things, which are all beautiful hobbies, really nice hobbies and things, nice things to do. And they open you up to, kind of what is out there, and just not only being involved in the usual things like family and commercialism and things, and they open you up to more, right? Expanding your, not just your interests, but expanding your energy through the world and into different planes and different sensations, other than just the usual what we're seeing and what we're tasting and things like that. Right? Because of a lot of the spiritual work that a lot of you have done, there's a tendency to feel like when it comes to mindfulness practice that you have to put your mind in some sort of spiritual space, that somehow it's related to all the spirituality stuff that you do. Right? And so when something feels deeply that you resonate with it, right? Or you feel like, oh, it feels so calming and loving, like that must be right then, right? There's a sense that must be the way to practice, right? And when I'm not feeling calm and when things are difficult and whatever, no, I can't join the mindfulness class. You know, life is too hard, and those kinds of things, right? That's a misunderstanding, and I know you've heard me talk about these kinds of things before, but you have to take a look more deep down, right? At even though I hear Jess say these things, is that really what I'm doing from moment to moment or in different situations? Is that really what's coming up? That understanding that mindfulness is not in the domain of spirituality in the sense that you don't, it's not about like really feeling right in the heart or resonating with things or loving what you hear and taking it in, or right, it's not about energetically. I mean, great mindfulness practitioners surely have good energy and surely have bright auras, and those of you that can see that kind of stuff can sense it, but that's not how it's done, and that's not what it's about. It's very normal and ordinary. The thing is that we are not ordinary usually and not normal usually for two main reasons. It sounds like I planned this talk. I did not plan this talk. Okay, here's the two things I was going to. So here's the two main reasons. One reason is what I just mentioned, is that our mind is not ordinary and normal and regular because we've put it into like a spiritual space, like, this is going to be a spiritual experience. Like, for example, if I'm going to lead a powerful metta meditation where I infuse metta with light and higher beings and things for an opportunity for healing and having a nice connection together and feeling love and right, one of my favorite hobbies, this kind of thing. So there's a feeling. So one way that we make the mind not normal is when we make it maybe subdued. When we make it subdued and not just how we regularly are. Right? We put it into a certain space, right? And that can be very obvious when we're doing it, but it also can be subtle. We can talk a little bit about the subtle versions, right? But it can be very obvious. You all know the obvious one, right? But still, sometimes you catch yourself doing it and thinking it's mindfulness, right? But there's the obvious ones where it's like, I'll be mindful. That's clearly not our normal consciousness, right? It's sinking down, being peaceful, right? I can tell in myself, so I'm not just pointing fingers here, that it's just I'm aware of it, but I can tell immediately as I did that I liked it, and I want to be there. I want to be in that peaceful place. Even when I was just sort of pretending for you, my mind settled down, and I liked it, and I wanted to keep it, right? So if it happens for me, it certainly happens for you, right? That wanting to keep it that way, right? And so that's not normal, right? That's sort of abnormal or not normal on the side of peace and love and spirituality, you know. And then the other one, which makes our mind abnormal and not normal, is harsher defilements. That's the thing that makes our mind abnormal, right? So when we get completely caught up and immersed in a heavy, uncomfortable opinion, right, about someone, something, a difficulty in our life, work, whatever it might be, but we get immersed in it, and then we feel harsh feelings, right? Our mind is not normal, right? We've moved into lower realms when we've become that way. And what I'll conclude in the harsh defilements, not just like angry, really, really harsh feelings like that, but also considered harsh from a Buddhist perspective, is the mind that is so dull, like overly dull, where you just can't have any focus at all, right? No focus at all. You don't have to have extreme focus, but the mind that has moha, which is a mind that is very dull, and just you can't stop it from wandering away to irrelevant things, right? Just continuously going into irrelevant topics in the mind, or straying way away into an irrelevant topic, right? So an example for me is in front of Luang Pa Pramot, when he was saying, "Oh, you're practicing well," and then all of a sudden I went in telling my friend. I was like, "Oh, guess what? I was with Luang Pa today, and he was saying that I was practicing well," and I was right in front of Luang Pa Pramot, talking to my friend who I'm going to tell later, right? And Luang Pa said, "You've gone into the pool, right? You've dove into the pool of thought now, right?" So, right, in that case, when you go for that long and that deeply, right, where you're just completely oblivious for an extended period of time to where you are and what you're doing, that's also abnormal, right? It seems normal for us because that's how we are, but it's actually not a normal, ordinary mind. It's a mind that's been completely taken away. Like, shouldn't the ordinary mind, when you're driving, I'm not saying you have to be very mindful, or not have to be, an advanced being, but just when you're driving, to just, when you're turning, you kind of know you're turning, and you stop at the red light, and you kind of know you stop at the red light. Like, it should at least know. It doesn't have to be knowing the body and how the feelings and every movement, and now my foot's moved from the brake. It doesn't have to be like that, but just, right, just to be ordinary, or to be normal, right? When you park, you're parking, right? That kind of thing. And similarly, when you're taking a walk, right? If you turn left or turn, sometimes when you're going straight for a bit, I mean, it's on and off, you might be paying attention, you might not. That's normal if there's a little bit of attention, but when there's no attention, in those big chunks where there's no attention, and we completely wandered off to something, and let me add that it was something that we didn't intend to think about. So if we're going to go for a walk, it's very ordinary and normal that there's something you need to think about or figure out, and so you decide, okay, let me think about this, let me figure this out, I'll plan this, if it's a work thing or a family thing, whatever it might be, right? That's normal, right? But you're walking and you're going to the store, and then off you go to 3 years ago, that darn person, and why'd they do that, and that's not normal, right? That's a problem, right? That's self-inflicted pain, and so that's not normal. That's not an ordinary mind, right? That's a mind that if you died in that moment, it would be very dangerous. That's a moment that's a habit that's something you don't want to be a habit. Right? When the mind goes in those directions, you don't want that to be a habit. You want it to be able to snap out of that fast, right? It does it, and you can't stop it. But when it does it, you want to be able to snap out of it fast. You don't want to follow that train, because that's the train going in the wrong direction. So the mind that has a big dose of moha, or a big dose of anger, or a big dose of greed, right? It's ordinary and normal to have a little greed, and then it's gone. Like, I want this, and then that's gone. Then you want this, and then that's gone. That's normal. That's ordinary, right? But when it's so immersed in it that it can't think of anything else, or it can't enjoy life because it's wanting something, so badly, um, right? Or all day long, or these kinds of things. That's abnormal, right? That's like a hungry ghost. That's like an earthbound spirit, wanting to have its body and can't get it. That's, again, the train in the wrong direction. We have to be able to snap out of that fast. Right? So there's like just the regular human being mind is what's required for mindfulness, where it doesn't get carried away or lost for very long. And we start to see, so getting to the fact that it isn't like all spiritually when you're in a state of samadhi, for example. It's just really, when you have samadhi, it just feels normal. It just feels ordinary. And it just feels like you're just here. You're just here. You're present, but not stay present. Nothing like that. It's just you're here. Shrug your shoulders and you know it. You turn your head, you know it. You get up, you got up. You're making a tea, you're making a tea. You're just doing what you're doing, but it's unforced. Just normal, natural, unforced being here, being there for your life. The trick is, in order for it to be unforced, right? In order for it to not be forced, the trick is to just notice when you've gone absent, when you go missing, right? And then it becomes unforced to be normal and natural. Because each time that you notice that you've gone missing, like you've gotten lost in the stories, so deeply or so heavily that you've forgotten that you're sitting where you are or doing what you're doing, right? Each time you wake up, if you're unbiased, if you just know it as it is, then for the next few moments, you're going to have samadhi. If you just know it as it is without having any opinion about it, right? Or any dislike of what happened, you just know it as it is, then for the next few moments, you'll know there's a body. You'll just be there. You'll know there's a body, or if you start thinking a lot about what just happened, you'll get a sense, oh, look at that, and now it went to think, and it'll sort of do that automatically. You'll have just a little bit of samadhi for maybe just a few seconds even, of returning. You're back. You're back with your body and mind. Just briefly, after you have a moment where, a moment of mindfulness where it was just impartial to whatever happened. It was just noticed what happened. So the mind goes abnormal in the senses that I mentioned, and you wake up to that. And then once you wake up to that, there's some leftover samadhi from that. Just a little awareness just for a short time, and then it fades again. Right? And then you become mindful again. I'm going to, I want to chat with a lot of you today, hopefully, and if you're willing to talk a bit about your practice. And I have a feeling I'm going to be talking a lot about observing or watching the body, because uh, as I practice more and more and having more and more experience, and then also combining that with Longpa and what he's been saying a lot lately, what he's been noticing a lot lately, is that in order to maintain a degree of mindfulness throughout the day, mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of um, doing formal practices and practices during the day where we're paying attention to the body, it just allows you to be more uh, continuous in your practice. That mindfulness kicks in, the willingness, the practicing mindfulness correctly becomes more easily available in a sense, like when you're paying attention to the body or there's movement. When you're doing your formal practice and doing some practices during the day where you're involving noticing the movement of the body, it just spills over into your day so much easier, and your mindfulness ends up more correct. Why I say it more correct usually is why it's usually more correct is because if we're just trying to notice the mind during the day and we're not really noticing the body, then we may think, oh, hang on, I forgot about my mindfulness. Okay, how am I feeling now? Right? Right? Familiar to a lot of you who practice mindfulness? Right? We think, oh, shoot, my mindfulness. Okay, how am I feeling? And then when we decide, okay, how am I feeling? Right? Then what happens is we're wanting to know how we're feeling, right? We have thoughts and ideas, and then what we do is we send our mind down to the emotions to go have a look at how we're feeling, and then decide this is how we're feeling, right? And then sometimes we don't know, we can't quite feel how we're feeling because our mind's too busy and we're not quite sure, right? And then it just becomes a confusing episode. It's not right. It's not all that valuable. Right? But that whole time, if we're like, oh yeah, how am I feeling? And we noticed our head move up and to the side, then we just practice mindfulness correctly and we're done, right? But all this, and trying to find how we're feeling and things was all incorrect, the whole batch, right? So it wasn't very valuable, right? But just the turning of the head or the shrugging of the shoulders or noticing that a face, a smile appeared on your face, that was correct. So in a sense, it's so much easier to be correct, right? And then you might notice in the next moment that, oh, okay, that's good. And then you might notice that you're getting a little bit tight or intentional in noticing the body. And then you go, oh, I see the intention. I see that. And then you're correct again, right? So now you've gone from being able to see the body to being able to see the mind, right? And then you're going to be noticing the mind correctly, right? Noticing that there's intention or controlling or trying. So I have a feeling that's going to be a bit of a theme as I speak to you guys individually, because I'm noticing that there isn't anything that seems to help you more than watching the body as far as practicing spilling over into your day. Right? Because in a sense it's so much easier to do once you understand it. Right? Once you understand it, it's a lot easier to do. Okay, so with that, anybody want to participate?